You're tuned in to Reimagine 2021, version 11, the #1 virtual crypto and blockchain conference. Coming up, our panel of industry speakers tackle the murky legalities around DAOs.
How important do you think it is for large financial institutions and more governments to adopt cryptocurrencies to really reach the masses?
I think it's really important for them to get on board sooner rather than later in some way or some capacity, because right now you're seeing these markets that aren't really regulated that well that start popping up, and I'm not the type of person who thinks, oh, well, that's going to be great. We're going to live this crazy libertarian lifestyle, and it's just going to be this crypto market, and everyone's just going to be in their own ecosystem. That's not really how I look at it. I look at it like, I think this technology is fantastic for efficiency and all the other use cases that we know is to be true. But it also, we live in this world that is very focused around government or has some sort of government presence. And so how can we coexist and make sure that taxes are paid? The infrastructure bills then get paid and so on and so forth, so then we can all live together cohesively. Maybe some sort of far out idea is to have DAOs basically on like a local presence, like maybe you're like 10-block radius, then it's like another DAO that exists on the city level, and then another DAO on the federal level, and that's, again, a structure to improve efficiency, but I think that's way far out. So I think, again, to my point, is really before it gets too out of hand, I think, and too big for them to really grasp at what's going on, it really is important for them, the governments, to basically have skin in the game and see what it's like to really have, let's say, CBDCs exist in the world and have people actually transact with them. Because they'll find out that a lot of the problems that they've been trying to solve could be solved with this technology. Who's the community manager? How are we going to effectively capture these interested people into, first and foremost, a digital space, but ideally also a physical space? So maybe local meetups, local events, things where you have that emotional touch point, because we are human at the end of the day. We can't possibly just be purely digital, no matter how much maybe some of my counterparts might say that might be the future. And so this kind of robust community, and then maybe also this new approach and mindset where you're saying, all right, well, we can't just suppress the negative comments by blocking them or just disabling comments. We have to let them come in and out. Otherwise, that community is not going to feel like they're heard, and you're going to have a ton of issues long term, as you're going to look back and say, well, how come we have 100,000 people in this community, but it seems like they're really disparate and does not really feel like it's in unison? And that's kind of where, if you take shortcuts, you might not have that really healthy community.
Definitely, the sense of belonging is what a lot of people like about these DAOs, and it is real work, a lot of these DAOs. So a lot of people are talking about the future of the structures and how they'll pan out. Do you see DAOs becoming the new future of legal entities and organizational structures?
It could be one future. I think the main difficulty is tying the legalities to the technology, kind of with the NFTs, right? Like NFTs, the kind of one line that people say is, you have verifiable ownership. Ownership almost implies legal recourse if something were to happen, but that's actually not the case usually, I think. And I'm not a lawyer, so maybe that's the caution to people watching, but it's something that I've tried to talk to my friends in the legal space, especially in crypto, saying, like, how does this actually work in the way that people expect it to work? So same thing with DAOs. DAOs, the technology has really moved really quickly, but I think the legal structures have still tried to figure out how to, I guess, regulate it if they want to regulate it, how it should be operated, if there's legal recourse, if something were to happen, it's not really clear. So I think the onus really is on the regulators at the end of the day, but also for professionals like you and me, trying to figure out how best to communicate this technology and really educate those regulators. Because right now, I think people are trying, but I think we need to do more to do that. And I think it's just the conversations and open conversations, nothing that is too restrictive and tribalistic, perhaps.
Do you see DAOs becoming the new future of legal entities and organizational constructs?
For sure, I could see that happening, but it's going to be, it's giving regulators a lot of headaches, right? So they're still trying to catch up with decentralized finance and even centralized cryptocurrency finance, and DAOs just kind of bring a whole different dynamic into this picture, right? It's not a central entity. You can't really go after one person or shut it down in a way. So like, then how do you regulate it? Like, how do you basically build safeguards and rules, which I do believe in, right? So there should be regulation, there should be rules put in place, and those should be there for consumer protection and not really limiting the consumers in any way. So we feel like there will be a lot of innovation coming around DAOs, especially that they're borderless. And if you start to look into, like, for example, tie it back to the metaverse, if there's a DAO that exists in a metaverse that just really doesn't have any borders, then are we going to have nation states within the metaverse, and who's going to govern them and who's going to rule them and what's possible or not possible there? So regulation overall will probably have to catch up on this type of innovation, because the speed of innovation, as we've seen, is not slowing down. It's just getting faster and faster. And they have been caught sort of unequipped to deal with that. But I strongly believe that they will be able to catch up, and they'll definitely have to scale as the technologies grow at a faster pace.
Definitely coming in the future. Like we're just figuring out legal structures right now, jurisdictions, like different countries have different laws and that kind of stuff. But it will, like what we've seen a lot with COVID and everything like that is like how work exists. Like obviously we have work from home and this kind of stuff. But then we have things like Uber has generated like gig economies and that kind of stuff. We can kind of put these things together, into DAOs. Like say Uber was a DAO, like it can't really guarantee this, but maybe the drivers would have more benefit versus, again, the shareholders right there. If they were the ones making decisions, or contributing to the decisions, that might be better off for them. And so yeah.
Based on what I've seen right now, I think there's a chance that's the case. However, I think DAOs are still in such an early stage that it'll take people a long time to understand what they mean. Like for me, for example, I find it much easier to explain NFTs to someone who doesn't know anything about NFTs versus someone who knows nothing about DAOs to explain what that's like. So I think that it's going to be harder for DAOs to be a gateway for people into the world of Web3 and crypto. But I also think that the ways DAO function, especially successful DAOs where community members are very active and care very much so about its future and its legacy, it's going to be a great example of what is possible in terms of future legal organizations. However, I think we're still a little too early on to tell kind of conclusively what that would look like.
I don't think that it's like a future in terms of, like something old is decaying and there's like a new way of doing things. It's probably different still. So it just opens like new different ways to raise money or like collaborate for people. But it doesn't cancel like all previous legal frameworks for launching your like entities, legal entities and corporations, all this stuff. So both things, they're kind of different, they solving different problems.
I see them being another option, but I think until there's like clearer like guidance on like regulatory frameworks and stuff like that, I think they present a great option, but I think for some things they don't represent the best solution. But maybe they represent an excellent solution for like internet collectives, communities, groups of people trying to share value and wealth amongst one another without having to set up like a formal like real world entity. But in a lot of cases, I think you might still have to do that. So I think they'll kind of just be like an add-on or like a plug-in into our current framework.
I think that everything will be in the digital realm. And so all of these legacy systems that we have relied on, and look, I'm not against the legacy systems. They got us where we are. It's kind of like when Jay Clayton, who I actually thought did a good job at the head of the SEC, was really interesting one time. He said, look, we built the largest market in the world, the envy of the world, created tens of trillions of dollars of wealth using a legal and structural framework and a regulatory framework that turned out okay. And maybe we need to think about that as we migrate into the digital age. I'm like, you know what, that's actually really good. And I think the same thing's true here. Is I don't want to blow up. I'm not an anarchist, or I don't want to blow up the old. I want to make it better. I want to migrate from analog to electronic to digital and take advantage of what digital first or DAO first is good for. And so if we think about that, legal structures, right? People, humans, and pieces of paper need to be displaced. And just like we shouldn't have physical stock certificates or bonds, we got away from clipping coupons, literally clipping them off and sending them in and getting paid our coupon on a bond. Now these exist in electronic form, but they actually are physical stock and bond certificates at DTCC in Dallas, Texas. That should be replaced by hopefully provenance, which we actually own a little piece of. Blockchain, which could make all of settlement of securities transactions digital first. And I think LLCs, corporations that were the result of the industrialization of agrarian economies and the movement to corporate structures, that's great, and we needed all the people to do them, but now we can do what those people did with code. And in the same way that I think 50+% of people used to be involved in farming. Now we have sub 3% because technology got better, because we had more machines and we had more opportunities and we discovered oil. One of the things that's amazing about oil is the discovery led to the end of slavery. People are like, what are you talking about? Like, well, a single barrel of oil stores 40 person years of labor. So you didn't need as many people anymore. So you could actually, have a better society with hydrocarbons. Now, are there other ways to replace hydrocarbons in energy? Sure, but hydrocarbons actually aren't all that bad in my mind. But ultimately, to answer your question, the DAOs are a digital structure that allows us to migrate away from these historical legacy systems. And I absolutely think they will ultimately replace, but not very fast, because first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you. So right now we're in the fight stage. So 09 to 15 was the ignoring stage, 15 to 21 was the laughing stage, 21 to 26-ish is the fighting stage, but ultimately it's all going that direction.
I think it really depends. And I'm sorry I'm falling back on that classic lawyer answer, but it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I think that DAOs are incredibly flexible, and I think that a lot of the legal ways in which DAOs are being wrapped have a lot of power, but there are still things that need an S-corp, and there are still things that are going to need a limited liability company or a limited liability partnership. And that's just the nature of how our regulation system is set up. That's just the nature of how secrets are important to some corporations. Like, I don't think it's a good idea for Coca-Cola to become a DAO because you can't share their secret formula. Same with KFC and their 12 special spices or whatever it is, right? Like, there are trade secrets that need to be kept protected. And the thing about a DAO is not only do they share this bank account, these assets in common, one of those assets is the information. And so if I was in a DAO of KFC, everybody in that DAO would know the secret recipe for KFC. For Coke, it's the secret recipe for Coke. And that sort of secrecy does not do well, or that sort of non-secrecy, let me put it that way, does not do well outside of the open source universe.
And so do you see DAOs doing business with other DAOs? Do you see enterprises, collaborating, being part of these DAOs from traditional side to this more decentralization world?
It's going to be different. You're not going to sign a contract with a DAO, but you will be able to enter some sort of economic agreement or or agreement based on your social standing and your shared influence in a space. And I think that will happen for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I always get a laugh when I hear lawyers talk about DAOs and how they aren't legally complete and they're not legally accurate. And there's an incongruency between the law and DAOs. And the issue is that in the law is a codified set of rules. And then that rules then needs to be interpreted through a court and a judge and a jury and whomever, right? Mm-hmm. And so like, should the money go here? Well, okay, we have the laws and then let's bring the evidence to the court. Well, smart contracts just literally are judge, jury, and law all in one. Yeah. And so there's an incongruency because it actually disintermediates and makes a lot of laws obsolete.
Yeah. And do you think some of these laws will catch up? Like, do you think there's going to be some structure? And maybe this is more probably 30,000 foot bird's eye view, because the laws are the laws, and crypto overall has been operating around them, and regulatory is really not clear. But do you see DAOs just and maybe crypto, finding these loopholes and will just kind of operate and you can't stop them?
Yeah, I think DAOs aren't above the law in general. Yeah. DAOs, if you have a DAO that's operating under some illegal premise, then it just, instead of going after one person, the law has the ability to probably go after a lot of people that are involved in this illegal DAO. But when it comes to enforcing outcomes and decisions within DAOs, so let's say, I got upset because I wanted more ownership of something and I went to a lawyer and I wanted to sue the DAO. Well, the lawyer's gonna say, well, these systems don't really interact. And so when it's a matter of, is the DAO operating under the right premise? And yes, the law is involved when it comes to determining if, a smart contract should have done X, Y, or Z. Well, once you're interacting in a DAO system, you got to play by the rules, because the rules are all, their code is law in that world.
DAOs as new form of human coordination also raises new forms of question, like what is the legal status? Can a DAO enter into a contractual agreement? Can a DAO be held liable? Many would say, well, that's one of the benefits of a DAO, is no, it can't. But in the real world, there's actually some practical limitations on it. There's been some positive regulatory moves here. In fact, in the state of Wyoming and I think a couple of other states, DAOs can be recognized as legal entities. But I think what's happening is you have DAOs working with DAOs. It's pretty familiar. You have corporations and LLCs working with corporations, and the complicated part is when they intersect with each other. But my sense is there's going to be positive regulatory moves that are going to facilitate all of that, and they'll be able to be integrated with the traditional flow of business, just like anything else.
So you think these are just on an uptick moving forward?
They, as with many aspects of crypto, DAOs seem relatively unstoppable. Yeah. And so I think the big question from a regulatory perspective is, do you embrace the innovation or do you reject it? Historically, rejecting innovation doesn't work very well. And DAOs, I think, have critical mass now where they're not going anywhere. And so it'll be a much more fruitful avenue to incorporate that into everything else going on than to try to reject that, that's for sure.
And yeah, and kind of what, on the regulation front and risks of that sort, even on the crypto side, it's a little bit vague, but they've allowed most to flourish a little bit and innovate, and allow kind of where we're at now. Avoid, obviously preventing scams and stuff from 2017, yep. which was great, and now it allowed other people to build in confidence, but we're still kind of working towards a more clear regulatory.
Yeah, so the regulatory debate around all of crypto is definitely heating up. It seems both likely and probably necessary that more regulation comes. I think the real question is sort of what form is that going to take? I think the good news is the crypto industry is not being caught flat-footed by it. We're really staffing up and ready to engage authentically. And there's various jurisdictions with various rules, right? The one thing that I think is true is in the early days of the internet, the federal government was very specific non-interventionist to enable the innovation to flourish, and that worked out pretty well for the United States in particular. It seems that crypto is a global phenomenon. It's not going anywhere, and those jurisdictions which work with it productively, I think, will benefit, while those that don't will suffer.